never surrender. Not going down without a fight. I'll never surrender. 'Cause I was born to stay alive. I'll get through the struggle.
I've never actually had fireworks come out when I come out, so this was quite exciting. So I hope everyone enjoyed your lunch. It was a great lunch. And I know that, after lunch, people are sort of mellowed out, but this is a session that will really energize you. So cyber attacks and data breaches have cost Canadians $3.12 billion per year. For an added layer of protection against potential losses from a cyber attack or data breach, organizations often look for insurance providers. In this next session, the 2022 State of Cyber Insurance, powered by Arctic Wolf, you will learn about current cyber insurance trends and recommendations on how organizations can obtain or renew cyber insurance coverage. So here to introduce your speakers and moderate the session is Abbas Hirji. Ali has over 15 years of experience developing and leading software development, AI, and cybersecurity programs. He specializes in applied research programming at Durham College Center of Cybersecurity Innovation and the AI Hub, with lecturing at academic institutions across Canada. He is the host of Power Hour with CyberX, In the Node with Kaspersky, and Tech Talks with Durham College. Ali focuses on, and I love this, ROI, return on imagination. Ali encourages his students, partners, and listeners to explore the possibility of innovation with AI, blockchain, and programming and cybersecurity. Ali is also pursuing his PhD at York University. Recently, Ali has been a cyber instructor at the Youth Employment Services and is growing his skill set to run virtual tabletop games and immersive learning experiences. So please join me in welcoming your moderator, Ali. Wow, I get stuff coming off the stage too.
I'll never surrender. I'll never surrender.
All right, just gonna check out my sound. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah. All right, super. All right, so it's kind of late to be saying it, but welcome to 2023. Another year for us to try and get it right. And hopefully today we can talk about how we could get cyber insurance just right. My name is Abbas Hirji. I'm not going to dive further into my bio, not much there, but thank you, Rhonda, for all of your amazing introductions. And I'm going to dive right into this topic. With insurance, it's pretty simple, right? You know the saying that there's one thing in life that's worse than death, and that is spending time with an insurance salesperson. And over the last 6 months, I've had to go through the process of trying to figure out my own insurance policy. So today, courtesy of this panel, we're going to dive deep into this discussion, and we're going to try to figure out what are some of the trends in 2022, and some lessons learned, and some predictions going forward. Firstly, I'm going to start with Octavia. Octavia, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about why this topic on cyber insurance is important to you.
Thank you, Ali. I am Octavia Howell. I am the CISO of Equifax Canada, and cyber insurance is actually important to me because one of the things that we have to remember is that, if we actually do this right, then we can make sure that we're upholding not only our business, and we become a business enabler, but it also ensures that we can actually help the economy thrive as well, right? And the reason I say that is because it is something that if companies can't thrive, the companies can't actually continue to support each other and actually continue to make money, that actually trickles down. And so not only are we trying to make sure that we're securing our companies or securing our assets, but we're trying to also ensure that we keep the business going, right? And so it's critically important to me as the head of security at Equifax, because I'm not only protecting Equifax, but also protecting our consumers' data as well.
Thank you for that. And for those of you that want to read more about Octavia's bio, I do encourage you to go to cyberx.org or cyberexchange.ca. Octavia, thank you for everything that you do and also being an advocate for diversity. Karibuni sana to this session, because I know you understand Kiswahili and I belong to the Tanzanian diaspora, so I thought I'd throw that in there. Fun fact, Octavia also has a math background. And one thing about math, I can tell you, it doesn't make you into a calculator, it makes you into a creative thinker. And you'll be seeing a lot of that in this session. Next, I'm going to welcome all the way from Aussie, oi, oi, oi. Last time in Australia, is there a country you have not been to? Lisa from Arctic Wolf.
I've been to a lot of them, many countries. My name is Lisa Tetrault. I'm the Vice President of Security Operations at Arctic Wolf. Why cyber insurance is important to me is because I've had the pleasure of seeing breaches happen and be able to mitigate them before you've needed to have to use cyber insurance and call it in. I've seen also the unfortunate part of what happens when you do have to call in cyber insurance and what that happens to businesses when they've had to end up on the bad side of a breach, and how detrimental that is to a business. And I don't want to see that happen. So mitigating it and preventative measures are very, very important to Arctic Wolf and to myself. And I want to do the best that we can to prevent that and partner with any customers that we can to see that. So that's why it's important to me.
Looking forward to that in your journeys through cyber insurance. You've traveled a lot. I have everywhere on my bucket list to travel to as well. And last but not the least, all the way from the United States, Chris, who is a researcher, which means he has a lot to offer from an informed curiosity perspective. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and why this topic.
Sure. My name is Christopher Fielder. I am the field CTO with Arctic Wolf. I've been in cybersecurity for almost 23 years now. Many of those years were hands-on keyboard, incident response, penetration testing, all the fun stuff. And now I get to look into cyber insurance, which is so much fun. The reason it's important to me is because we get asked about this a lot, and I have to pretend I know what I'm talking about. So digging into it and figuring out, how do we answer questions from customers, and how do we get them to really maximize the potential of this type of stuff. So cyber insurance is really interesting because it's a bit of a Pandora's box where a lot of providers did not do the research they needed to before they started writing these policies. And then the claims started rolling in, they started hemorrhaging money. People want these policies, and they can't put that evil back in the box. So now we have to figure out how to dig our way out of it. So it's really interesting.
Thank you very much for that. So we're going to dive right into the questions. Now, I was doing a session on cyber insurance last week with the province of Ontario. And one of the things that we said was, when it comes to cyber insurance, it is a very young industry. It's not even old enough to drink. But from that perspective, Octavia, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. Why has cyber insurance, for multiple organizations and sizes, why has it become such an important topic, especially towards the end of 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know, security incidents have actually continued to rise. Right? After 2017, we started seeing a building of momentum of cyber attacks. Not only that, but now we actually have cyber attacks that's made into big business, right? And so now you have organizations that are run just like companies, right? They actually have outsourced. They have, they have other partners that's actually coming and doing these cyber hacks with them as well. And so with that, we have companies that may not be able to really uphold their security posture to be able to get the cyber insurance that they need. And so I think it's become big business because you've seen the economy, you've seen the supply chain actually happen, and the supply chain breaches. We see what happened with the Colonial Pipeline in 2019, and how that actually caused a massive issue, a buildup in the U.S. You see all these other attacks that's happening that's really going to cripple the economy if we don't actually do something, right? So cyber insurance is a way. It used to be a way that we just pass on risk. But now it's not a way to pass on risk. It's now being a way that we actually uphold the business itself, right? What happens after a breach, and are you going to be able to sustain your business after that breach? And I think it's not about if, but it's about when at this point.
Absolutely. And I just want to work with that just a little bit. And Lisa, I'll take flight and come to you. From your perspective, sitting from the Arctic Wolf side of things as a managed services provider, similar question to what I asked Octavia. Why now? And more importantly, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing some of your partners and some of your customers facing when they're trying to procure cyber insurance?
Yes. So what we're seeing a lot of is exactly as you said. The insurance companies are, or the customers are trying to push the risk on the insurance companies, and the insurance companies are coming back and they're not wanting to either insure the customer, or the rates are going up, or they're writing some parts of the policy out, so you're not getting the full coverage. So what we're really trying to do is look at, from our perspective, what can we do to mitigate that risk? What can we do to help them de-risk their whole portfolio? And so we're seeing opportunities to help our customers, with some low-hanging fruit sometimes that they haven't even really thought of. So enabling MFA might be a quick win that might not be mandated in an insurance policy, but that is a quick win to de-risk some of their cyber risk. And so partnerships like this with Arctic Wolf, we found that that strategic consultant seems to be very much desired in the opportunities that we're able to provide. A security awareness program, making all of your users aware of what a phishing attack might look like. That's also really helping get your whole entire user base more aware and more, security savvy, and seeing that and helping that as your business, it's really helping your livelihood. Christopher, what do you think?
Completely agree. I mean, why now? Because organizations are floundering, right? Mm-hmm. So they're stuck going, okay, I need something that is going to save my job, save me money, and forgive me, I'm an American, but save our asses, right? They need to do something, and they're grasping at straws, and they're seeing this as an opportunity. One of the things, if anyone's a CISSP in here or taking any of those certifications, one of the things they teach you is risk, right? That's right. One of the easiest things to do with risk is to transfer it. And if somebody is saying, hey, for this small amount of money every month, you can transfer the risk to me, they're going to jump on it. Guess what? It's not working out that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just going to encourage the audience that if you want to ask a question, just in the interest of time, you can tweet it at me. I've got a couple that came in. For those of you that have me on other instant messengers, just message me away or use the Cyber Exchange chat. And I am going to throw a curveball at the panel right now, so we're all awake. An interesting question came in, and Lisa, I think it sort of relates to you, but then we'll see how we go with it. It's this concept of you're chasing cost reduction all the time. And from a cyber insurance perspective, at least now, that philosophy probably doesn't work very well. Your perspective, Lisa?
Well, in cost reduction, I mean, you're going to end up paying it at one point. You're either going to be breached. It's just like what you said. You're going to end up breached, and you're going to end up having to pay for it. So you really have to look at how do you lower the risk and the investment in the risk. Look at the business case and really understand where it is that you can invest in lowering that risk. I think looking at the entire portfolio of what you have, understanding your assets, understanding how you can mitigate it is where you have to go. I think underinvesting in this space is really short-sighted, and working and partnering with a provider that can help you, do the business case is one way to look at it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Stop trying to minimize cost. You're doing something wrong. You're doing yourself a disservice. Instead, look at maximizing what you're actually spending. Put that money in the right place. Because if you minimize the cost and then you get hit with ransomware and you go to your board and say, hey, they're asking for a $3 million ransom that we have to pay, but I saved us 10% on our budget last year and saved us $100,000, you're still fired. So don't seek to reduce cost every time because you're chasing the wrong idea here.
But I will also say, right, it's also about looking at, as Lisa said, the risk. But we have to make sure that one of the things that I have seen with some of my peers, and I love you all, But I think some of the things I've seen is that we try to actually put security in this bubble, and we don't want to communicate to the business, right? We try to hold on information. We understand the risk, and we have like this black box of vulnerabilities and what we're not doing. And instead of actually going to the business and being able to make that business case, being able to say, hey, these are the things that we need to be able to, we're going to pay it in insurance, and then we're not going to be able to get another policy, or we're going to pay it in setting up these infrastructures, setting up these programs, setting up these security awareness trainings, right? We invest here, we can pay a lower premium here, and we'll be able to actually come out on top. Whereas we can still not invest in our infrastructure, in our people, in whatever, and not actually tell the business exactly what's behind the dark curtain, right? And then we get ransomed or we get popped, right? And then we end up paying out insurance, we have to pay at a higher premium, and then we're still gonna lose our job. So it's up to you what exactly you wanna do and how you wanna communicate.
I also think that the security risk isn't just like a business unit conversation, it's a board conversation.
Absolutely.
You got to push that up to the board.
Absolutely.
And raise up what you see, what the risks are up to the board level.
And what's the risk of not doing it?
That's right. If you're not raising that information up and you're just keeping it at the VP level and what have you, then you're holding that risk yourself. So it has to be, the conversation has to be brought up to the board.
And one thing I always say, security doesn't accept risks, right? I don't accept anyone's risk. Technology can't accept a risk on their behalf. It's a business decision, and business can't make decisions if they're not informed.
And I'm seeing a lot of questions, even one coming from Bill Harmer specifically around this. So I'm just going to reword these questions a bit. So one of the things with security, especially when it comes to insurance, that I've sort of held in my head is don't be afraid to be that person who takes on the role that nobody wants. And having that role to negotiate what our insurance is going to look like has been a case of hot potatoes, at least for me in my institution. Octavia, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Lisa, and then, of course, soft landing with Chris. Octavia, what is our role as security leaders in engaging the insurance community? And I'll add to this with Bill's question, which is quite interesting, because one of the things that you find is a lot of policies are very generic, and that can complement into very outdated security practices and checklists, kind of like security. So what's our role on the security side in engaging with the insurance community?
I guess I wouldn't say only our role, but it's also incumbent on the insurance partner as well for us to actually be partners and actually go into it as implementation champions together, right? And it can't be transactional, right? How are you going to be able to actually look and say, hey, I need to be able to have this policy if they're doing a checkbox, right? It has to be integrated. How can we actually write this down? Are you gonna, and I always say to every vendor that I've ever engaged with, either you're gonna be a vendor or you're gonna be a partner. Right? And I think we can't actually go to our insurance companies and actually try to just be a vendor with them. We have to integrate, we have to understand our risks, we have to understand what they can provide as well. And we also have to make sure that they can provide what we need. So it's not just about going to the first one that comes about, right? You have to be able to shop around, you have to understand what they can provide, because I think Lisa said it at the very beginning, it's a new industry. But then some of these insurance companies, hopefully none of you all in the room, but some of these insurance companies, they became insurance companies before they actually knew what they were taking on, right? And so we have to make sure that we go in with a trusted provider, understanding exactly what they can do, and a company that is actually sustainable as well.
Yeah.
Lisa, from your perspective as well, if I can just reword the question just a bit, as Arctic Wolf, and I'm going to be direct when I say this because we had this in our pre-panel discussion, it may make a lot of people wonder what a managed services provider, as excellent as Arctic Wolf is, what are you doing in the insurance space, and how are you engaging with the wider insurance communities, Arctic Wolf?
Sure. So we're trying to help make it like with the greater good, and we've offered some free managed awareness training videos just to try and help make it better for all. So that's available on our website to make everybody a better place. We're engaging as well with the greater cyber community to share a bunch of information. With all of our customers, we're partnering with them in a security journey to help minimize what it is their cyber risk is, and we're customizing it in their journey. And so not every customer is equal, and so our role in that is to help them get the best, cyber profile as possible. And when we do that, that will inevitably help them with their insurance. I think this topic really is near and dear to us because we want them to have no incidents. And if they do have an incident, and when they do have an incident, we want to catch it soon so they don't ever have to engage, but always have that backup plan and always have that policy under their pillow if they do need to engage, right? And so we're really trying to minimize it because we're there with them if that ever happens.
Chris, I'll come to you, but there is one question, and I'm just going to massage it in very, very neatly, along with the same question to Lisa. My question to you, an added addendum, is when you work with Arctic Wolf, and then there's the question of transparency with your insurance broker as well, how do you tread that very, very interesting line?
Sure. So what our role is when it comes to cyber insurance is we do not consider ourselves to be a traditional MSSP or service provider. Instead, you may have heard us use this marketing term concierge, right? Which basically means we want to do whatever it is that you need for us to do to get you the best service. And that includes answering questions if you have questions. And if those questions are, what is cyber insurance? How do I get the lowest premium? What do I need to get the policy? We want to be able to answer that for you and work with you on that. And that's a unique approach. That's where we come in. We also are able to get you the visibility that's needed to identify threats in your environment, respond to them quickly, and we do that 24/7, 365 coverage. So these are things that insurance companies love to hear. And we will help work with you on that. Make the pitch to your insurance provider to get those premiums lower and say, hey, these are all the services that we offer. Now, when we're talking about transparency, what do we really mean there? Like, what are we talking about? Like transparency with
your insurance brokers, what I'm reading from this question, how much do you tell about your exposure and the level of risk that you're open to?
Oh, be completely honest, because you don't want to get dropped. You don't want to get dropped because they go back and say, hey, you didn't tell me this. In the same way you get car insurance and you don't want to go and say, hey, I got in a wreck, and they said, oh, you didn't tell me about the 13 DUIs you had previously, right? Mm-hmm. Do they have DUIs in Canada? I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
No. And I think there's a bit of a sense of urgency that you have also emphasized on, right? Like work with your managed service providers. Moral of the story, there is danger in delay. Now, folks, I know I can't make this stuff up. I can send you screenshots. I have 3 questions from Cyber Exchange. 3 Daniels competing for it. There's a Daniel Pinsky. There are 2 other Daniels that have messaged me, and I want to weave their questions in because they kind of do relate to what we were talking about. Octavia, this is directed at you, and I'm going to read it verbatim. You're in a situation where the CEO or the board wants the CISO to procure and spend X amount of dollars on an insurance policy. But instead, you as the CISO are thinking, I would rather spend that money on tools to prevent a breach completely. What do you do in that situation?
So I think we have to actually look at the cost of the tools, right? There's a way that you can do both, right? And so, as I said, you kind of look at, you want to buy the risk down because, yes, you want to spend money on the insurance policy because you just want to be protected. But if you actually have certain tools in place, it will lower the premium on your insurance policies. So what you do is you make sure that you're actually looking at both sides. Look at the cost of the actual tools, look at the premium of the insurance policy, and what tools can you put in place that lowers that premium. So at the end of the day, you technically did spend the money on the insurance policy because what you did, you made sure that your infrastructure was shored up, you made sure that your programming was shored up, and then you also ensured that you had the insurance as your CEO wanted.
Yeah, you make your own decisions. You're not driven by public opinion. I like it.
Can I add to that? In addition to that, we also want to say, who's going to run that tool? You're investing in the tool, but who's actually going to utilize it? If you already have a bloated stack and you throw another tool in the mix, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and you're wasting that money. So make sure that you have somebody that's able to use that tool effectively. Otherwise, you're not going to get really anything out of it that you would get with the insurance premium. I could spend $10,000 on wood and tools, but I'm not going to get a shed if I don't have somebody that can build it. You put that money into that tool as well. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get the return on investment. So make sure you have somebody that can use the tool effectively if you're going to invest in it.
I will also say you don't also always need a tool.
Yes.
Right? Like I want to be very clear, right? Some of it is programming, some of it is policy, some of it is that. So you don't always need a tool to be able to do something. But yes, if you're going to buy a tool, you need to make sure that you have support, or that tool will be your new attack surface.
Chris, I'm going to keep you on stage, and then I'm going to go back to Lisa, and then we'll come back to Octavia. Chris, similar question, but this came in from another individual, Daniel Pinsky, who was a member of our advisory board. And his question is less about transparency and more about, because, for example, you look at the directive from Lloyd's and the removal of the acts of war, so on and so forth. And for those of you who are going to be going into this, there's a research paper from Arctic Wolf that I'll be referencing towards the last few minutes of this session, and that will be available on Cyber Exchange for you to view it, to read. Very interesting perspective. Chris, the question sort of words itself in that because of all of the fear and all of the worry about the potential of when the next attack is happening, is the insurance industry making cyber insurance almost inaccessible?
At this point, I would say that's safe to say, because they did put the cart before the horse in some situations where they said, we're going to offer this as an additional source of revenue. We're going to tie it into the other policies you have for your business and say, hey, if you get hit, then we are going to be able to cover you. Unfortunately, in our research, we found a lot of them didn't do their due diligence and say, well, what is this actually going to cost us, and are we offering effective policies? And then again, we started to see claims rolling in and them going, we are not in the business of losing money. So now they've kind of put the brakes on things, and they're making it more difficult to get policies. It's not impossible, but they are making it a little bit more difficult, especially as we see more attacks trending up and we start to predict what's going to happen in the future. Nobody in here believes that attacks are going to be minimized in the future, right? We're going to see more and more attacks, more effective attacks, and attacks that are going to cost more money. And they have done their research into that as well. So yes, they're saying if you want a policy with us, we are going to make it more difficult. We're going to put the emphasis on you to actually make it worthwhile for us to insure you, rather than just throwing these policies out there like candy, right? For a while there, it was very much like, forgive me, do you have Oprah here? And Oprah was constantly doing the you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. And it was like, you get a policy, you get a policy, you get a policy. They were making it that easy. Now it's not the case.
Lisa, anything you want to add to that in terms of insurance being a little inaccessible now?
No, I think that's about right. It's and even some of the policies that you had this year compared to last year, they're starting to even change what's included. Same price, it could be excluding things now, or they're jacking up the rates. I think it's changing. Yep. So the onus is on you to change your threat landscape and kind of minimize the risk.
Yeah. Octavia, I'll reword a question that I received, and it also ties into the script that we had. And it's a question on sort of learning from, the great good people learn from their own mistakes. Great people learn from the mistakes of others. What are some lessons from the field that you can share with our audience when it comes to prioritizing your risk when you're planning for your insurance? Where do you choose where to focus, and what best practices can you share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the choice is really looking at your program and what gaps you have. I think you have to actually understand what things you don't have, what policies you don't have. If you look at, hey, do I have older infrastructure or legacy infrastructure that can be upgraded because this is a system that brings in, $14 million a month, and I won't be able to actually upgrade it because if you touch it, it's going to fall over and die. Or if you reboot it or if you patch it, it's going to die, right? So it's like you shift all of your risks to that, and you actually look at it. So I think you have to look at your gaps. You can look at your gaps to tabletops. You can't assume that they're gaps. You have to look at where they are, where they're located on the network, what protections are there, what things can be put in as a compensating control, right? And I think you start there. You start at your biggest gaps. And what we also need to understand is we have to start at our human gaps as well, right? Shore up your programs, make sure that you're looking at your security awareness programs. But I think you really kind of look at the gaps first. And if you're looking at the gaps, then that's what you actually focus on in your insurance policies, right? You don't go and say, I'm just going to get a blanket generic approval or generic policy that covers, is going to cover infrastructure when all your stuff is in the cloud, right? You don't go and say, hey, I'm going to look at a policy that only covers, federal governmental stuff, and I don't even do any government data, right? You have to make sure that you understand your business and look at a policy that covers you for your business.
Thank you for that. And there is a question that's come in also related to engagements with the board, but we'll come back to that sort of towards the latter half. We have about 7 odd minutes left, and I'll come back to that a little later on. Lisa and Chris, I want to spend a little bit of time on the report that Arctic Wolf had published. And one of the elements, and Lisa, we'll start with you, one of the findings in that report was, till date, the number one requirement from insurance providers is antivirus.
Yeah, interesting.
Tell us a little bit more, and where do you see this evolving to?
Yeah, so from the field, what we see a lot of is compromises coming in from lack of patch management, so vulnerabilities, open vulnerabilities. We're seeing lack of MFA. Preventable measures could have been a little bit more security awareness training, and proper incident response plans could have helped in a shorter period of time. So based on those insurance policies and needing that requirement, just based on what I see from compromises on a day-to-day basis, it's a little bit outdated.
Chris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that speaks to a lot of, so the antivirus thing speaks to how ill-prepared a lot of insurance providers were when they started writing these policies. We found that they said, if you have antivirus and you have a firewall, then this is a safe bet for us. We'll start writing these policies. Yikes. Years ago when I was a pen tester, if I was looking at scope and it said they have a firewall and antivirus, I would sign up for that test in a moment, because that would be an easy way to make some money, right? Because that is going to do essentially nothing for your environment. So it's showing that they need to evolve and they need to catch up with modern technology. The other thing we found from the report that was super interesting, and this is some advice I have for everybody in here, is identify what your goal is when you go seek a policy out. And then make sure that your policy is achieving that goal. Here's what I mean by that. What is the number one reason we found that organizations were seeking policy coverage? One word. You can yell it out. Ransomware. Ransomware is exactly what it was. And when we dug deeper and actually looked at the policies, we found a vast number of policies that had addendums or exclusions to not cover damage caused by ransomware or ransomware payments. When we brought that up to the policyholders, most of them were unaware of it. So they were paying monthly for policies that were not actually covering what they sought to get the policy for. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a breakdown in communication there, right, where your security staff, your IT team may be saying, hey, we need this policy. They pass it to finance. Finance is involved with negotiating and saying, get it low. They sign off on it, and then that occurs. So just make sure that you're achieving your goals with that. And then I would say, yeah, check out that report, because we found a lot of other very interesting information in there. And I'm pretty proud of that.
Just sticking to the report, just weave in a quick question for both of you as well. Your report, did it see any particular trends in North America per se, in the EU? Because I know the report also looked at South Africa and looked at some other countries as well. Is there any trends that you can comment on over there, or any differences that you want to highlight for us?
Yeah, when it comes to the due diligence that insurance organizations are putting into what they're requiring in their stack, the EU is kicking our ass, honestly. They're saying, okay, we are putting a much more stringent set of policies in place. You have to have these things in your stack before we'll give you a policy. Where again, in North America, they're saying antivirus and a firewall. And that's unfortunate. And that's why they're actually in a better position in the EU from what we found. So, we are right now in a position where we're catching up and taking their lead. We're saying, you know what, we're going to get those things in our stack. We're going to make sure that you have to have that. And as Lisa said, something like a multi-factor authentication, good endpoint detection response, and, coming from Arctic Wolf, 24/7, 365 coverage is super important as well. If you go to your insurance provider right now and say, I've got 24/7, 365 coverage, visibility across the entire environment, I've got a good EDR in place, and, I've got multi-factor authentication, your premium's going to be reduced. Like, that's not even a question. So make sure you fully explain that.
Lisa, anything you want to add?
No, he nailed it.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting, though, right? Because normally we take lead from what's happening in the U.S., right? When the U.S. sneezes, we all catch a cold. But there is a little bit of a difference over here.
What's the difference, though?
GDPR.
That's right.
Yep,
GDPR is
absolutely.
the reason they've got better stacks and better requirements right now.
Yep. All right, so we've got just enough time for one last question, which will serve as our closing comments. Octavia, I'm going to start off with you, and this is a question on communicating with the board. There are organizations, I'm a part of a couple where I sit on the board as well, and you have the teams that are communicating with you and trying to explain to you their position now on cyber insurance, especially going into the new fiscal. What are some tips that you would recommend to CISOs as they're communicating to the board on the path forward when it comes to insurance?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to always start with the why. Why is this important? Why are we actually coming and making this position in the first place? And then tell the how. I think we often make mistakes of actually telling the what and the how and not understanding or not communicating the why. And so if you start with the why, you start with why this is important, why you're actually saving the company, and not to start with the problems that the board has handed to you, because everybody know they got handed a shit sandwich, right? So if you actually start with why, then I think we can kind of communicate a little bit better, but you always start there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of my mentors kept repeating this to me, which is the idea of when you are communicating with the board on insurance and risk, listen to understand, not to reply. If there's something you don't know, come back to it and hold. All right, Lisa, we'll come to you. From your perspective, going into 2023, direct question, is it going to get more expensive, more difficult to get cyber insurance, or do you see the landscape evening out just a bit?
Oh, I think it's going to get a little bit more hairy. It's going to get more expensive. Your policies are going to change, so read those up. Partnerships with providers are probably going to be a little bit easier for you if you can get a little bit of help. So if that comes with managed security awareness, if that comes with a risk portfolio that'll help you look at all the risks and prioritize them, I think that is probably a strategy that a lot of companies should employ. Maybe the 24/7 monitoring. If you can't do it in-house yourself, then partnering with someone that can do that. All of these techniques are very much going to be in your arsenal to really help you with your insurance conversations, if that's where you're going. Absolutely.
Right. And we wouldn't have a session with the researcher if we didn't put your research to the test, my friend.
Oh,
Is
great.
there one horror story or one success story? You don't need to name an organization that you'd like to close us off with.
I'll just come back to that one where, there was a horror story when we were telling these people that we were researching with, hey, all that money you've been spending on this ransomware policy? Yeah, you're not covered for that. And that money is gone. I mean, their jaws dropped, and now they're going, how do I talk to the board about this? And this money is not covered. How do I negotiate this back? And guess what? That's going to come with a premium hike or a dropping of the policy as well. So do your due diligence, research, make sure you're paying for something that you actually need and want. And then I'll just leave it with, anything that is going to improve your security posture, minimize your risk, is also going to minimize your premiums. So invest wisely, invest in what's going to help you, and lower premiums will follow. Insurance companies are not going to take the risk any further. So now it's something that is going to be necessary, but it's going to be somewhat difficult to get. And over time, I think it'll balance out, but it's just going to take us a little while to get there.
Precaution is indeed better than cure. Now, I know we have 30 seconds left, but I know we are running short on time, so we will come to a soft landing over here. What can I say? That was fun, and much like fun, so is insurance. Fun, the older you get, the more mature you get, the more expensive it gets. And the same with insurance. With that, Chris, Lisa, Octavia, you were awesome. I want to thank everybody for rushing back from lunch. Shout out to the team at CyberX. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And if I didn't get to your questions, I'm sorry. I love you. I will get to your questions when I do a power hour, and we'll do another session on this. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Take care.